Praise God. I trust you've been partaking with us, participating with us, listening to the podcasts and all that kind of stuff, just getting the sense of where we're going with this series on The Voice. We're endeavoring to try and communicate that Jesus wants to talk to us, and it's his voice, once again, that we need to hear. We've been going through the series looking at the voice of destruction and how so easy it is for that voice to be a loud voice in our own lives. That not only who we are, but what we do, that there's a voice that would look to destroy that. There's a voice that would look to take us down the path of disloyalty, that would take us down the path to separate ourselves from God, to separate ourselves from people, and to move in that journey of disloyalty. Last week, remember, Craig delivered a fantastic talk on dishonesty and how truth is so important for us to create an atmosphere of truth and honesty and integrity as we go through our lives. And this morning, we looked at the voice of something else, disunity this morning. Just so you're listening, disunity this morning. I want to talk this evening about the voice of distortion. The voice of distortion. When I was a little boy, I was on a Saturday night, as it's still, I think it still is, Doctor Who used to be on. Is that still right? Help me. Is it still on a Saturday night? Okay, nobody watches Doctor Who. I think it's on the Saturday night. But when I was a little boy and it used to be on the TV, it used to scare the living daylights out of me. And it was one of those programs that as a little boy, I used to hide behind the couch. And I would peep out every now and again to see if it was okay. And it wasn't so much about the little small TV that my mum and dad had. It was about the voice of the guy who was the Daleks. And that scared me to death when I was just a little boy. I remember the fair used to come to Fraserburgh when I was a kid, and it was on the beachfront. And my dad would take me again when I was a little boy. And there was all these rides that we used to go on. But the one, again, that filled me with fear was when you go into the Hall of Mirrors. And you go in, it was a darkened room, and I would go in there, and there was all these people staring back at me. They looked a bit like me, but they weren't really me. And you go to the next one, and somebody else looked a bit like me, but it wasn't really me. And it used to scare me going into the Hall of Mirrors. Why? Because things were distorted. Things were not as they really were. They were almost, but they were not. They sounded familiar, looked familiar, but they weren't really who they were supposed to be. This voice that I hope you're going to hear will sound like somebody you know, but they may not be exactly as they are. Maybe we can play it. Maybe we
Hello, everybody. Welcome to church. We're talking about the voice of distortion. So make sure you listen up carefully.
So I need you to... So I know that you're all involved in distorting things on Snapchat. That's how it goes. But distortion, you see, is that alteration of what it's truly supposed to be. It's that when you take something and make it inaccurate. It's that when you falsify the reproduction of an audio. And when these boys are doing it, it's the alteration of the waveform. And it's supposed to, I guess, sound like familiar. It's supposed to be okay, but it's not okay. And I want to say to you, for all of us in this room this evening, there is a voice of distortion that is coming at you and I, which almost sounds good, and it almost sounds right. But if we listen to the voice of distortion, it will take us down a journey that is a perilous place that we end up. If we listen to that slightly distorted voice, then we can end up in a place of confusion, and it can end up both with personal pain, but pain for others also. And so, hey, I didn't plan to talk for long. We're just going to talk a little bit about this little portion of Jesus, again, reminding the people that are around him. The premise, of course, as we know, the setting is the hillside around Galilee, as he's delivering the Sermon on the Mount. And that little verses around verse 16 are the kind of crux of the time when he's saying to the people around him, you are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world. So go and shine the beauty and the wonder of what we've already been reminded about this evening. As God's Holy Spirit speaks and reminds us that there's a love that casts out, it takes away all fear. And that love has been already communicated by God through his Son, Jesus Christ, to you and I, as Jesus died on a cross on Calvary 2,000 years ago, 2,000 miles away. And that was for you and I. And now he entrusts that love to be deposited in your life and in my life. Now he entrusts that truth to be deposited in your life and in my life, that we would shine forth tomorrow morning, 7 o'clock when we're up and we're getting going to get into the world tomorrow morning, that we would shine as lights. And so he's looking to remind us and to shape our attitudes and to shape the voices that we're listening to, that we might be the bright, shining ones, that we might be the ones who don't have the lids on and are not being able to shine because of that which we hold inside or because of the voices we listen to. And so this voice that we're going to read together is from Matthew chapter 5 and verses 38 through to 42. Just a short reading together. And so let's dive into this and unpack some of the truth that this little story unfolds. He says, "You have heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evil person. If someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn him the other one also. And if someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. If someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You've heard that it was said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth." It sounds great. It sounds good. It sounds the right thing. It sounds about justice. It sounds about things being right. Jesus was quoting from the law of the equivalent, or the law of proportional retaliation. It was a law that was established way back in the older part of the Bible. And in the early books of the Bible, both in Exodus and in Leviticus and in Deuteronomy, it's mentioned again and again. In Exodus 21, it was, "But if there is serious injury, you are to take life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot, burn for burn, wound for wound, bruise for bruise." And in Deuteronomy 19:21, he says, "Show no pity, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, and foot for foot." It was the law of the equivalent, that which you received, you were able to give back. It was, I guess, to ensure that there was no punishment that was greater than the offense. It was to prevent, I guess, vigilantes. It was a means by which the society was to police each other. It wasn't a mandate or a license to go and punish people around. It was supposed to be set for the society's benefit. You see, in those early days, in those tribal days, there was wars going on between factions and between a city and a city and a town and a town. And there's a famous story about Jacob's sons in chapter 34 of Genesis. Their sister was a woman called Dinah. And Dinah was out with her friends, and she was in the local village. And this guy, the kings, the local landlords, the local, I guess, kind of guy who lorded over that city, his name was Hamor. His son Shechem had the hots for Dinah. And he took her and he raped her. But of course, as well as raping her, he fell in love with her, madly in love with her. He was absolutely besotted with her. And so he came to his dad and said, "Dad, you got to get me this woman. I'm in love with this woman. Yes, I've violated her, and yes, I have sexually done what I shouldn't have done, but I'm in love with her. I just did it because I'm in love with her. And now please get her for me, Dad. Can you arrange it with her tribe and with her family to get her?" And so the story goes that him and his father went and presented themselves to Jacob. You see, at the time, all of Jacob's sons were out in the field working. And they hadn't become aware of what the story was, but the father knew. But the father didn't tell them, and then in comes this guy, Hamor, the local lord, and his son, Shechem. And they come into the tent, I guess, that were there, and they said, "My son is besotted with your daughter Dinah. Please let him marry her." And the sons said, "There's no way that's happening. There's no way that our sister is going to marry your boy. You see, we're all circumcised, and you're not. And so the only way that you can marry our daughter is if the whole bunch of you get circumcised." "Ooh," they said, and took a sharp intake of breath. And then there was a little bit of conversation went between Hamor and his dad, Shechem and his dad, Hamor. And they said, "I think we can do this, and we'll go back to the town, and we'll tell them that's what needs to happen." And so the Lord and his son went back to the town, and they told the story, and they said, "This is the only way. It'll be good for us. It'll be good because these people will trade with us. Business will grow. It'll be great for us because my son is in love with their daughter Dinah." And so about the men in the city, they said, "Well, okay, if that's what it's going to cost us, that's what it's going to cost us." So they agreed to do this so that the boy could marry Dinah. But you see, what happened was that retribution and revenge outworked. It says that then Simeon and Levi took their swords and they entered the city. In the next 3 days, when the wounds were sore and sensitive to every man, that they couldn't even move, the brothers Simeon and Levi entered the city. They took their swords, and without opposition they slaughtered every man there, including Hamor and Shechem. Then all of Jacob's sons went over. They plundered the whole city because their sister had been dishonored. They took away all the flocks and the herds and the donkeys, everything they could lay their hands on, both inside the city and outside the fields. They took all the women, they took all the children, they took all the wealth of every kind. I wouldn't want to cross these boys, huh? But it was because of that feudal type of existence that God put in place this law that said, actually, an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth. So that it will keep the state in that place of never giving too much retribution, never being excessive in the punishment that comes. It will always fit the crime. But as you go down through the years and the ages, what then unfolded was that people were now taking a personal license that they could do what they wanted to do in revenge. People were giving on an individual basis as good as they got. They wanted to give back to individuals that which they were getting. It's made the excuse that road rage was okay. You remember that person who cut in on you this week and you went, or you opened your window and you shouted out the window, "What are you doing?" Or that time that somebody unfriended you on Facebook and said, "Well, I'll show them. I'll tell everybody what kind of person they really are. The world needs to know what they are." And when we do that kind of stuff, when we feel I need to get back on those people that are hurting me, those people that are saying things about me, those things that are happening to me, the natural response for all of us is that sense of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That I want to give back that which is proportionate to what has happened to me. You see, that truth is that hurting people hurt people. And it's true for all of us. That in our natural desire, it rises up within us that we want to get back. And Jesus says, you've heard it said that people want to give as good as they get. You've heard it said that it's an eye for an eye and it's a tooth for a tooth. You've heard it said that if somebody does something to you, then it's within your rights to do something back. If somebody hurts you, then it's within your rights to hurt them back. If somebody takes something from you, it's within your rights to take something from them. If somebody says something bad about you, it's within your rights to say something bad about them. You've heard it said. But you see, Jesus comes and he brings a freshness and he brings a difference. And he says, you know what, I want to quieten the voice of distortion. I want to give you people, not you, but the people in here, I want to give you another reality that will bring from you that bright, shining light. And it's the radical voice of transformation. It's the radical voice that is different from the voice of distortion. He says to them, but I tell you, but I say unto you, do not stand up against the evil person. Do not take a stance. Do not set yourself against. Do not consider yourself an enemy of the person who does something to you. Take that radical refusal to insist on your rights, regardless how legitimate. And Jesus offers 3 examples that we're going to look at in just these few moments about how to quieten the voice of distortion and listen to the voice of transformation. That for all of us, he's looking for you and I to have that unexpected response. Because this week I have no doubt that all of us are going to be hurt. This week I have no doubt that things are going to be said in our company that are going to make us go, ouch. This week I'm quite sure that we're going to be excluded from stuff that is going to cause us pain. This week things are going to be taken from us that they're not supposed to be taken from us. This week things are going to be asked of you that are going to mess up your world. And God is looking for you and I to have a radical response to each one of these occasions. You see, everything we do has got a voice. Everything we do has a voice. How we speak has a voice. How we dress has a voice. How our attitude is has a voice. What our behavior is like has a voice. We always tell the band on here, it's not about what they sing and say that actually is the voice. It's how they behave on the stage that has a voice. Everything has a voice and it communicates some stuff inside. Everything actually has got a voice that actually demonstrates who we really are inside. The relationships that we have has a voice. The choices that we make has a voice. The priorities that we make in our life has a voice. The connections that we have with people and with stuff and with things has a voice. The actions that we take in our lives day by day has a voice. And the reactions that we have a voice. Everybody in this room is listening to each other to the voice of our lives. And tomorrow morning as we go into the workplace or the student accommodation, or we go into the university, or we go into the office where we are, or we go into the school or the business, or whatever it is tomorrow morning, people are listening for the voice of your life. People are listening for the voice of your actions and your reactions. People are looking for the voice that says, are you the voice of distortion that is an eye for an eye or a tooth for a tooth voice? Or are you the voice of radical transformation? Are you the voice of the radical, unexpected behavior, unexpected response that people are going to, whoa, what's that about? And he gives these 3 examples. And each one has got importance for you and me, because it's how we listen to the distorted voice of the slap of the face, or how we listen to the distorted voice of the shirt on your back, or how we listen to the distorted voice of the steps of your walk. So let's look at the first one, the distorted voice of the slap on the face. I don't know how many of you, if we had a show of hands, that have had a slap on the face at some times, a physical slap on the face. I wasn't looking for hands, but we'll pray for you. We'll pray for you. Okay. Hey, sorry. Hey, let's have a communal. I'm so sorry. Jesus said, if someone strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other one also. See, the picture that was painted there was, he specifically says the right cheek, because most people were right-handed, and the hand that was identified in the first century was the right hand. It was always the right hand. And so this is a slap like that on the right cheek. If you get the physiology right, the right cheek, right hand. Yes? You with me? You see it? Slap. It was the height of, it was the highest insult. It was the height of offense. It was the massive put down. It was the statement that says, I don't like you. You're of no value. You're of no worth. I have the power over you to hit you and strike you. I have the power that says, this is what I think of you. I can do this to you, and I can have the power over you. I am the one who says, I don't approve of who you are. I'm the one who says, you've no contribution to make. I'm the one who says, you're of no value and you're worthless. I am the one who says that everything that you do is of no value whatsoever. I'm the one who says you're not invited. I'm the one who says you're not excluded. It was the biggest insult that you could get. Whether it was the physical insult, many of us in here, as I'm seeing, you've all had a slap to the face. But for most of us, actually the slap in the face that we get is a verbal slap in the face. The words that are said to us that hurt and sting, they leave an impact on you, that cause pain, that inflict a wound, that cause you hurt. It's the words that say you're of no value. It's the word that says you're excluded. It's the word that says you're different, and so therefore you're not part of the crowd. It's the word that says that which you do is of no consequence and is not approved of. It's the word that comes to you and says, you know what, I don't want you in my company, and I have power to say to you what I want to say to you. It's the verbal, but it's also the behavioral. The behavioral slap in the face is when there's a crowd gathering and you look to sneak into that crowd and become part of that crowd, and the crowd moves a couple of steps over and you're left standing on your own. Or you're not invited to the party. Or everybody says they're going one place and they go another place. And I guess more and more these days is the digital slap in the face, where somebody clicks unfriend, where somebody clicks block you, where somebody doesn't like what you've done. Somebody doesn't like what you've said. It's the sting on the face. It's the slap on the face. And you see, when that happens, the issue for us is that we get all worked up because of the value of who we are. It's wrapped up in the value of who we are. And for many people, I guess we're looking for that approval from the other person. We're looking for the other person's approval to say, I like you. You can be in my crowd. That which you say is worthwhile. That which you do is worthwhile. And that who you are is worthwhile. But when we get the slap on the side of the cheek, when we get the sting that is there, oh, it's so easy, isn't it? It's so easy for us to say, I want to give you that bit of fivefold ministry, and I'll punch you in the face. You slap my face once more, I'll punch you. It's easy, isn't it, when we start writing something saying, well, actually, and there's a tirade of stuff comes. I'm sure. I'm talking, huh? I'm talking. It's so easy for us to have somebody slaps us and we think, okay, I'll take that IOU and that's in my back pocket. Because you've taken something from me by that slap. You've taken something from me by that verbal comment you've made. And I've got an IOU in my back pocket. Because so many of us are waiting and identifying people as the source of our place of approval. People, others, are the source of our value. Others are the source of our identity. And we get tied up in approval, and we get tied up in having to behave to avoid the slap. And we do everything that we, you know what I mean? We slip and slide so that we don't ever get a slap again, because we know how painful that was. And so we shift our behavior, and we shift our priorities, and we shift our actions so that nobody gets an opportunity to slap us, and we're not true to who we really are. You see, it's the voice of distortion. And Jesus comes radically, and he says to you, I want you to walk in freedom. I want you to be free. I don't want you to be tied in to avoiding the slap. I don't want you to be responsive to the slap. I don't want you to have an IOU in your back pocket. He says, I want you to take up a posture that presents your left cheek. I want you to take a posture that has got a voice. Because that posture says, I'm not looking to you to identify my value. My value comes from who God is. My value is well within. You can hit me this side, you can hit me that side, you can hit me any side. It's not going to determine who I am, because who I am is determined by the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. And you see, that's the reality of what it means when he says, turn the other cheek. It's not just, oh, beat me up then. It's not that, because that's what we commonly hear that story. Beat me in the left, beat me in the right, beat me here, beat me there, beat me up, beat me there. No, it's not lay down and be the mat. It's actually taking a positive posture that says, you can do that if you want to, but it's not going to affect who I am. It's not going to affect my value. It's not going to affect my worth, because my worth is tied up in who Jesus says I am. My worth is tied up in what God has done for me. And so behind it all, you see, the voice of distortion would try and take us in a direction that God never wants us to go. It's not eye for eye and tooth for tooth, because we don't need to do that. Because he's the one who says, I love you, and you're valuable, and you're worthwhile. We've already heard it this evening. I don't need to say much, because we've already heard what God thinks about every one of us in this place this evening. His amazing grace is available for all of us. So the distorted sound of the flat slap on the face, the distorted sound and the voice of the shirt on your back. In the first century, most Jewish people had maybe 3 or only 4 bits of garment. They had the shirt on their back. It was called the tunic. It was the thing nearest to them. It was the thing that was closest to them. It was the most intimate garment they had, and it was often tied with a belt or a sash or something. And then they had a pair of sandals. They might have had something on their head to keep from the noonday sun. And then they had a cloak that was around them. And that cloak actually was their identity. That cloak was, we hear about it so many times in the New Testament. But that cloak actually was such an important garment for them. It was, each man had an individual cloak. That was often for some their only possession. That was such an important possession. Nobody was really able to take that cloak. Nobody was able to really have the ability to steal that cloak. That cloak was the significance that they had. It was the possession that made them significant. If everything else was lost, they still had that outer garment, because that was the garment they slept with at night. And he says in Exodus, if you take your neighbor's cloak as a pledge, you got to return it by sunset, because that cloak is the only covering your neighbor has. What else can they sleep in? When they cry out to me, I will hear, for I am compassionate. God was saying through Moses to the children of Israel way back in Exodus, the cloak is the most important garment. It's that of most significance. It has got most meaning for every individual, because it's the thing that they get wrapped up at night. It's the thing that they have comfort in. It's the thing that is of the most significance for them. And yet here comes the distorted voice of the shirt on the back. It says, and if someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, that which is close to you, let him have your cloak as well. Let him have your cloak as well. You see, what's he kind of trying to say there? He's trying to say once again that our value is not in the possessions that we have. Our value is not in the stuff that we've gathered. Our value is not in the things that make us significant. Our value is not in the accumulation of bits and pieces over many years that make us significance or have significance. Not even the thing that is most intimate to us. Our value comes from God. I think I've told this story already, and forgive me if you know this story, but it's a wonderful illustration. Because when Elizabeth and I went and had a look, we had 4 children, and the next one was due, and we were going to be moving out of our home into the next home. And we went and we were looking high and low for a house, and we went down Anderson Drive and found found this really nice house and a lovely elderly couple that were living in this home. And they'd never been upstairs for several years because they didn't need to. They had no children. And they just put a curtain at the bottom of the stairs and never went upstairs. But they kept the outside immaculate. It was beautiful. The garden had roses in it. It was a great big patch out the back. And we thought, with all these rugrats that we had, this is going to be great. It'll be fantastic. They'll all be able to play out the back and have a great time bouncing on trampolines and just having a wonderful time. So it was going to be an ideal house for us. And so we said to the couple, this is our offer. They said, yeah, that'd be fantastic. We're so excited that our family is going to come and use this family home. And so that was tremendous, and we're going to be moving in a few weeks' time. And just nearing the crossover time, I got a phone call from the dear old gentleman. He says, Iain, you better come down here. Your neighbour is out with an oxyacetylene torch, and he's taking down the fence outside. I said, oh, right, that's a bit important. So I got in the car and came down, and sure enough, here's my neighbour with a big mask on, and he's to the fence in the front, and he's trying to dismantle the metal fence that was at front, and he's busy at it. And I drove up and I tapped his shoulder. I said, hi, I'm your neighbor. And he went, ah! I thought he was going to set fire to himself or set fire to something. He got such a shock that I came down. How do you know? Why are you here? I said, oh, your neighbor has informed me that you were outside trying to take down the fence with an oxyacetylene torch. He said, oh, I thought they were away. I thought they'd drifted away. I haven't seen the car for a few days. So I just thought I would come and take down the fence. I said, right, okay. There's obviously a backstory here. So I'm pleased to meet you. My name's Iain. So he said, yeah, you've just walked into a lawsuit. I said, oh, right, okay. Yeah, okay. You want to tell me about the lawsuit? Yes, there's 7.5 inches that are in your territory. That is actually mine. It belongs to me. And I want that 7.5 inches. And so he unfolded the story of how he'd been off work for about 9 months with depression. He couldn't sleep. He was so agitated. It cost him so much money in lawyers' fees already. He was agitated and anxious. He'd lost his kind of direction in life. It had been such a stressful time for him. But he wanted that which was, for him, was most significant, and it was my land. And he said, there's 7.5 inches. It runs right up the property, and it's there, and it's mine. I said, okay, you take it then. And he said, what? I said, yeah, you can. I'm not bothered with 7.5 inches. Why don't you take it? Oh, put off the oxyacetylene torch and said, all right, well, we can talk about that, can we? And that neighbor has been the best neighbor that we've had for the last 22 years. He's been an outstanding neighbor. He's just fantastic. He's a wonderful man and a lovely wife, and they've been just the best. But you see, if you and I are so obsessed and taken with that which is of significance, the shirt on our back, if the shirt on our back is so important to us, if the cloak that we wear is so vitally important to us, if we're going to fight over the cloak, if we're going to fight over the shirt, if we're going to hold so tightly that which has been given into us and entrusted to us, then life is not going to go well, because I'm going to listen to the voice of distortion. And things become more important than people. And things become more important than life. And things become more important. And we'll get overtaken by fear when we don't have things. And you're saying, well, yeah, that's not me. And it may not be you. It may not be the acquisition of stuff, but it may well be the finance that you have. And being so tight with the finance that you have that it's grippy and inside that arm and you can't prise out, and you can't get the shirt off your back, and you can't get the cloak off. And Jesus would say, you've heard it said that you've earned it. You've worked hard for it, so it's yours. You've heard it said that you've put in the hours, so equivalent, you get it all back. But I would say to you, hold it lightly. I would say to you, don't put your value in the stuff that you have. And finally, he says these wonderful words for the distorted voice of the steps that you take. He says to them, if someone forces you to go a mile, go with them 2 miles. Again, in that first century, the occupying forces of the Roman army were able to enlist and take a hold of anybody and say, carry my rucksack for a mile. Carry my rucksack for 1,000 paces. And anybody but everybody had to do that. There was no question, there was no ifs, buts, or maybes. They were forced to then carry somebody else's burden for that mile. And you remember when Jesus was carrying his cross, Then Joseph of Arimathea was press-ganged into carrying the burden for Jesus. It was the same kind of thing, that the Roman soldier would force anyone to carry his stuff for that hour. They were the oppressive force. They were the ones who were occupying the nation. But they were inviting and saying, you got to serve. You have to serve. It's not a if or a maybe. You must serve. And if you don't, bad things will happen to you. Then manipulation would sneak in. You know, it's the same at work and in our families and in church even today. We're living life and we're doing what we want to do, and then something or somebody comes upon you and says, you know what, it's your time and your energy and your talent and your plans and your priorities. I want to get a hold of them. And we get all messed up inside, and all our lives are messed up inside because we're living for somebody else's priorities, living for somebody else's ask, living for somebody else's what they want to do, and it's always the same. That voice that says to you it's obligation, it's the voice of compulsion, it's the voice of you have to, it's the voice of expectation, it's the voice of compensation. If I do this, then I will get that. If I attend church, that's coming to me. If I tithe, I'll get this. If I serve, I'll get that. If I commit, then this happens. No, 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 no. Jesus is saying that's the voice of distortion. It's the voice of the 1 mile life. Because the 1 mile life was all about law, where the 2nd mile life was all about love. The 1 mile life was all about obligation, but the 2nd mile life was about revelation of who God is. The 1 mile life is about compulsion, but the 2nd mile life is about compassion. There's always 2 ways to look at everything in every circumstance and situation in your life. It was Dale Carnegie, you know, the guy who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People. He said that 2 men looked out through the same prison bars, but one saw mud and one saw stars. They were in the same situation, but had 2 different outlooks. And it's the same for you and for me when we're invited again to do that 2nd mile. Nobody's interested in doing that 1st mile. Nobody's interested in saying, oh, my whole world is going to be transformed. My whole world is going to be turned up and down, doing something that I'm obliged to do. And Jesus is saying, you know what, if somebody forces you to do 1 mile, if somebody forces you and gives you that sense of obligation, don't just do that. Go a 2nd mile. Be a 2nd miler. Be a more than kind of person. Tomorrow morning when you show up at work and you're invited to do what is your job, when you're invited to do what you're asked to do tomorrow, be the 2nd miler. Be the more than. Be the radical one who says, I'm going to deliver more than what I'm asked to do. Why? Because God has got your journey in your steps in His plan. You see, some people get value in what they do. And their value is found again in the accomplishment of what they do. And Jesus is coming radically again today and saying, you don't need to put your value in what you do. Your value is in who I say you are. Your value is not in who other people say you are. Your value is not in what you hold. Your value is not in what you do. Your value is in who God says that you are. And the radical voice says to you, be devoted all by yourself. Don't have anybody else being devoted for you. The voice of radical transformation is about treating people not as they deserve, but more than. It's about grace and mercy. You see, grace always flows from the greater to the lesser. It's always God's grace to you and me. We don't ever need to give God grace. The grace comes from Him to you and I. But we have the privilege, I believe, of tomorrow morning being the purveyors of grace wherever you and I are. Yes, you may feel like I and I, tooth for tooth, hand for hand, foot for foot. But God would say to you this Sunday night, as you show up tomorrow morning, be the purveyor of incredible grace. I think as we finish this evening, if the musicians want to come back on, we've got that truth about how Jesus managed when He was insulted, when His cloak was taken, when He was beaten up, when He was forced to go beyond where you and I would ever think any human being had to go. It says Christ suffered for you, leaving an example that you should follow in His steps. When they hurled their insults at Him, He never retaliated. When He suffered, He made no threats. Instead, He entrusted Himself to the one who judges justly. He Himself bore your sin and my sin on His body on the cross, so that we might die to our sins and live for righteousness. And Jesus exemplified not listening to the voice of distortion, but listening to the voice of radical transformation on your behalf and in my behalf. He knew that his value was in the Father. He knew who he was. And so that which he owned, his cloak, wasn't important to him. When people insulted him and beat him, he never retaliated. When it was time to carry his cross, he carried it and then some for you and for me. Oh, that we would be second milers. Oh, that we would be more than people. That we tomorrow morning would show up with a more than attitude. That we never give what we get. That you and I leave people into God's hands. That God is the one who gives justice. We are the ones who give mercy. That God is the one who matches what needs to be done. And you and I are the ones who give forgiveness. Hey, I pray this evening as we finish on a Sunday night and head out into Monday morning, that truth and that reality of God's grace and forgiveness has come to our experience. You know, all of us sit in here this evening and we don't deserve to be here. We've rejected God in the past. We've turned our backs on him. As it were, we've slapped his face. We've said, I'm not interested in you. You've nothing to tell me. There's nothing that I can't do and live my life the way I want to live my life. And yet he's demonstrated his mercy and his grace to you and me again and again and again. He never treats you and I the way we deserve. But instead his grace is sufficient for us. His amazing grace is available for you and for me.